Well, everyone, today I got recommended a video from one of you. I haven't noted down who did it. Johnny. Thank you, Johnny, for the suggestion. This video is from Frughie. As you can see, it's titled Why Game Optimization Sucks Now, which is a question that is very valid because optimization has sucked donkey for a while. It's been a problem. Honestly, it's not as bad as it was like 2.5, 3 years ago. I remember like Star Wars, Star Wars Outlaws ran really poorly, but also Star Wars Jedi Survivor ran really, really poorly. And I personally, my theory has always been that modern engines, especially Unreal, make it a lot easier to get games running good enough so that an executive signs off and is like, it's good enough, sign it off and send it off for manufacturing and distribution. That's my theory, is that like, because these engines, especially with like DLSS and frame generation, can get across the playable level much faster, and with those extra bells and whistles, it allows for the studios to cut those corners so that they don't have to spend another 6 months polishing or whatever, you know. It's my theory, at least. It's my theory. And I to be clear, the engineers, the designers and stuff, they would love it if their game ran on a Steam Deck at 200 frames per second. They would love it if it was super scalable and ran really well while looking really good. A lot of the time, the reason these games end up launching in the states that they do, it's because of the executives just shoving it out the door as is good enough. Like, I think good enough is a phrase that gets used all of the time. And I think that's a major component of this. But let's see what his theory is, what he thinks is going on. Oh yeah, that's that body cam game. I think it came out, didn't it?
It's no secret that with each passing year, games become harder and harder to run. With every studio trying their best to push games beyond what was previously possible and making each new project look better than the last. But there's a problem. While new games look amazing, studios seem to forget a very important element of a good gaming experience. See, the problem with bad optimization is you are effectively alienating almost 90% of your player base. According to Steam's 2024 hardware survey, only around 10% of Steam users actually have newer hardware that is capable of running these games at their recommended settings. And with only around 28% of users having more than 8 GB of VRAM, which is almost a requirement at this point.
Which is pretty important. I mean, it's an important thing to understand. Like, yes, Steam is massive. There's a lot of people, like a good buddy of mine, he only plays indie games. But part of the reason he only plays indie games is because he's playing on like a 10-year-old laptop. So, and for him, it's perfectly fine. He's totally fine with that. He doesn't want to upgrade. He makes really good money. He could if he wanted to, but he doesn't need to because he just wants to play Undertale again. You know, he doesn't need the firepower. So sometimes the data can get skewed because obviously the people with like 970s in their PC, they're not trying to play Crimson Desert. You know, they're not trying to play the latest and greatest super heavy, GPU intensive game. But I think the point stands that at the very least, it's important to remember that the average gamer, especially on Steam, is not running on like a 5090. They're not running on a 5080 or a 4090 or 4080 with frame generation and DLSS 4.5 turned on. Like, that's not what the average gamer is doing. They're running maybe with FSR enabled, maybe, but a lot of the time they are running on older hardware. They're running with a good amount less VRAM than is recommended by these studios. And that's, I mean, it starts to explain why a lot of people get frustrated with performance in these games for sure.
First reaction might be, well, just buy a new PC. And while that might have been a good solution
up,
3 years ago, it's not really a possibility today for most of us when a brand new graphics card costs a down payment on a house. Factor in all...
Dude, I guess some houses, yeah, you could get there. Not for $2,800. I don't know of a house in the US you could get for $2,800, but like down payment. But once you get to like the 5090 and you're talking about like some of those high end SKUs that are like $4,800, $5,500, $6,000 for a single card, like not that far off. Like, it's kind of insane. But anyway, yeah, it's true. I think a couple of years ago, it was easier to scale up. Like, I remember when Starfield launched, Todd went viral because he said, when people asked about performance and optimization, he said, well, you might just need to upgrade your PC. And that went super viral. People were like, you're out of touch. Dude, imagine if a dev said that now. Imagine if they show like Elder Scrolls 6 off and Todd's like, yeah, well, to get it running above 30, you're going to need a 6090. So... stop being poor. I'm sure that would go over really well.
All the other overpriced PC components, and you're looking at the price of a used car just to be able to play a new game at a decent frame rate.
Yep.
So who's at fault here? Lazy developers who don't optimize their games, scalpers driving up the prices of PC components, or gaming technology
data
not
centers.
keeping up? Well, it's all of the above. So let's take a deeper look into why game optimization sucks.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think scalping on the PC side, maybe I'm not familiar, but I don't think scalping has been a problem in the PC side for a long time. Since the crypto thing really slowed down, it hasn't really been an issue. Nowadays, I mean, I was in Best Buy the other day, just like walking around because we had some time to kill. And I like taking the boys to look at the big TVs and stuff. They really like it. But we were walking around Best Buy and I saw in their like PC section, dude, they had like 3080s. They had a 4090 in the case. They had a 5080 in the case, like readily available in a Best Buy, which when I worked there all those years ago, they didn't have any PC components. Like they maybe would have a hard drive that was like external with USB 2.0. I mean, it was an afterthought. Now they have like actual GPUs in the cases there. It's crazy. So I don't know if scalping is a big problem, but I think clearly hardware, that's mainly the AI, RAM crisis. So that's one component of it. But game performance specifically, I think is more of just a cost benefit. These games are stupid expensive to make, and a lot of the executives are making short-sighted decisions to just shove the game out because it runs quote unquote good enough.
When talking about game performance, the metric you use to measure it is frames per second, or FPS for short, which means how many render frames your graphics card is able to output in 1 second. The higher the number is, the smoother your game will feel. For decades, 24 FPS has been the standard in the world of filmmaking, giving movies a more cinematic feel. However, when it comes to gaming,
well, and it's important to understand that the reason 24 frames per second was used was because back in the day when they were actually shooting on film, outside of the Odyssey on IMAX, when they were shooting on film, like the frame rate literally meant more footage was being used. That's where the term footage comes from, because of the footage, the amount of it, right? The length of it, more of it's used, it takes more footage, right? So back in the day, they were like, how can we save cost? Because if we're shooting at like 60 frames per second, that gets really expensive really quickly. Do we really need to do that? It puts more wear and tear on the cameras and stuff because everything is moving faster than it would otherwise. And what they did way back in like the early 19 teens is that they experimented with a bunch of different formats and frame rates, and they found that 24 just happened to be about the lowest the number could go without it feeling choppy. Like you could still still retain smooth motion feel with 24. Below that, it feels too choppy. Above that, it's too expensive. And so it was just that kind of sweet spot. And because that was the sweet spot and the standard that was used for film for 50 years before they started to question, should we raise that? Everybody was already conditioned to 24 FPS. So when you saw it, you felt that feels cinematic. That looks like high quality films I've watched before, because that's what they use. But it's literally a conditioning thing. I mean, it's literally just that's what you got used to. And so that's what you feel is needed now. That's why when you see 24 FPS with the motion blur and everything, it feels cinematic. But then you see a movie running at 60 frames and it looks like a soap opera. It's because your brain is like subconsciously associating the slower frame rate with like heavier motion blur with cinema, and then the faster paced thing with like cheap soap opera, video games, stuff like that. It's very interesting. But I think it's another instance of where viewer conditioning is just what you have to deal with. Like, yes, we can point to it and say, well, we're okay with 24 frames there, but you're also demanding 60 frames here. But at some point, it just matters what players and what the consumer is expecting and feels is more appropriate. Even with like The Hobbit back in whenever that was, 2013, I think, whenever those movies came out. Maybe 2012, might have been even earlier. But with those Hobbit movies, they shot some of that in 48 frames per second. And I remember there being news stories of people going to the movies to watch The Hobbit and reporting that they got motion sick, that they had to leave the theater because the movie was in 48 frames a second. Just think how stupid that is. Like that people were like, oh, I can't handle it. It's too smooth. Like I can't even fathom. But that's what was happening because people were conditioned for 24 or for 30, and 48 was too smooth for them. It's very stupid. But I think that's also why a lot of people, like if you're conditioned for 60 FPS and that's what you've been playing on or with for years and years and years, and that's your like bare minimum, that's what you got to deal with, devs. Like, that just is what it is. You can point back and say 30 FPS was okay back then. Why can't we do it now? But some people just don't like it anymore. You know, they've tasted the forbidden fruit that was 60 frames, so they need more. I can play games in 30 FPS. Like, yeah, I can. Some of the best games I've ever played, I played in 30 FPS. Red Dead 2, old school Witcher 3, Skyrim, you know, Breath of the Wild. All those games I played at 30 frames, but then I tried them at 60. And oh, baby. It's hard to go back. I'll tell you what. Hard to go back. Anyway.
24 FPS would be considered unplayable to the majority of gamers. The reason for that is the rising popularity of online competitive games, which require split-second reaction times, where a single frame could be the difference between winning or losing. Another factor to consider is the increasing popularity of high refresh rate displays. While 60Hz was the standard up until the late 2000s, most people today would consider 144Hz to be the bare minimum to be able to compete in online games, with some monitors going as high as 500Hz. However, to be able to bring out your monitor's full potential, your FPS should equal or exceed the monitor's refresh rate. Because even if your PC is able to push 300 FPS, if you're stuck with a 60Hz monitor, your eyes will not be able to see anything above 60 FPS because your display doesn't refresh at a high enough frequency.
That's true. I'm also just going to be real. I think people who play a lot of competitive shooters like, you know, CSGO or maybe competitive people on like COD also care a lot. They will be able to notice the difference between like 144 and 240. Pro level, you can probably start to feel it at 500 as well. But like the average gamer, if you think that swapping from 144 to 240 is going to like magically make you a better player, it's not. It's not. It's going to look smoother. It will be hard to go back. Once I got used to 240 hertz displays, going back to 144 even feels like pretty stuttery. It's like, again, you've tasted the forbidden fruit. It's hard to go back. But yeah, the average gamer, like we said though, is not playing on like a 240 hertz display. The average player is on like, you know, a 3060 for their GPU, and they're playing at 1080p with a 60 hertz display. I mean, the average player is not dealing with that. But perhaps you could say that people have, maybe more people than ever are familiar or have tried higher refresh rates. That's possible too. But I mean, even when we look at that comparison for like PC, the low end we're describing is 60 hertz. Like the low end we're describing is like a 3060 1080p running a game at 60 frames per second. And even that, for a lot of these modern games, 60 frames is like too much. I can't do it.
So now that we know what FPS and refresh rates are, let's see how that plays into game optimization. See, to make a game run well, developers have to pay attention to a bunch of different factors like texture, shaders, and lighting, all of which have varying degrees of performance impact. Things like shadows and ambient occlusion tend not to affect VRAM usage that much, but things such as texture quality, anti-aliasing, and post-processing usually result in a big performance hit, especially on older hardware. So how do we deal with that? Well, the first and the most obvious solution is to turn down all the settings as low as they'll go and call it a day. And while that works for people who are only after performance, most of us don't want to play a game that looks like a Roblox tycoon. So the next solution is to use a magic new technology called upscaling. What upscaling does is it runs your game at a lower resolution and then, as the name suggests, upscales it to your native monitor resolution, giving you increased performance while also allowing the game.
I jumped a little because my dog outside the window barked and it scared me. Romeo thinks he's defending the fort, as it were. Yeah, DLSS and upscalers can improve performance, but because of how they work, it doesn't, like, it's not a magical panacea, as people have already seen. So, like, for example, Rockstar games, they are historically CPU bound. Like this type of thing, DLSS is not going to magically give you more CPU headroom. If anything, it might remove some of it. So in some cases, like, people will try to turn on upscalers and they expect that will just like magically fix things, or that will make their game run way better. But for some games, lowering the resolution doesn't actually make it run faster because it's the CPU that's holding them back. So it can fix and improve some instances. And for most games, it will improve performance because you're just putting less strain on the GPU. But again, it's more of a GPU alleviator than a broader system alleviator for sure.
To look good, right? Well, look, technology like AMD's FSR and Nvidia's DLSS should work in theory, but it usually just results in a blurry, pixelated mess which makes the gaming experience not enjoyable. Okay, so you might say, you can't have it both ways. You can't run older hardware while also expecting ultra graphics and great performance, and I agree. If you're using a 5-year-old graphics card, you have to get used to your games not looking great and rely on upscaling to run the latest titles, but there's a bigger issue in all of this. Now, when I say lazy developers, I'm not literally saying there are developers working on games that are just too lazy to optimize their game for a wider range of systems. What I'm referring to is game companies prioritizing profit and short development times over a good experience for the end consumer. So while it's expected that people running older systems will have to rely on upscaling to reach a good frame rate, it's becoming increasingly more common for studios to rely purely on upscaling instead of making their game run well in the first place. With some
and I feel like you can see when this works well and when it doesn't. Like the two instances I can think of were with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Crimson Desert. With KCD 2, I remember there was a post made on social media where they shared their text sheet for like minimum specs and everything. They basically outlined like, hey, to get it running at 1440p on high at 60 frames, you need this hardware, right? And it's a very common thing they do before launch. And when we saw it, we're like, okay, but is this done assuming upscalers? And so we asked in the like Twitter thread, hey, is this using upscalers to hit these targets? And they replied, no, this is native performance. When you put in 1440p, this is rendering at 1440p, not 1440p with FSR on ultra performance, okay? Like that's not how that works. Like unfortunately, a lot of games have to be built out and run assuming upscalers are being used. A lot of modern games do that, where like they will say, this is using DLSS set to balanced mode or set to performance mode. And it's like they've optimized with the upscaler in mind and turned on, which I don't like, because then they're effectively optimizing to run the game at 700p. You know, they're optimizing the game to run at 720p and then upscale. You know, and I think that's ridiculous. The other reason or other example was Crimson Desert, where I did an interview with Will, who is like their main marketing guy for that game and did a lot of tremendous work in the lead up to that game. And he said, when I asked him, hey, is optimization happening using upscalers or is it being optimized natively? And he said, oh, natively. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, we're going to get the game running well without upscalers, and then upscalers unlock higher frame rates if you want them. But if you want to just play it super sharp native, you can do that. And it was like, thank you. Thank you. Somebody said it finally. Like somebody is saying what we all are asking for, which is to get the game running well, and then upscalers unlock additional performance on top of that, which is the original promise. Like that's what the original idea was for DLSS and for all of these tools. Like this comment on the video I saw before I went full screen. I remember being so happy when DLSS was first announced, because that would mean even old cards would be able to run newer titles. And oh boy, was I completely wrong. Instead, it was used for newer cards to run newer titles. Well, and that's exactly the point. Like they're not getting more money out of you when you all of a sudden have a reason to keep your old card. You know, NVIDIA doesn't want you satisfied with your 20 series or with your 30 series. They want you to see the 50 series and go, ooh, yeah, I'll spend the money. Yeah, that's what they want. That's what they want. AMD, to their credit though, their tool sets with like FSR have a lot more backwards compatibility support than NVIDIA's, which is admirable, I think, and they deserve some credit for that.
Some games not even being able to run smoothly on high-end systems. Let's take the new Silent Hill 2 remake, for example. Even their system requirements clearly state that you should use upscaling technology.
Yeah.
Because when you don't, the game is so poorly optimized that running it on a $3,000 graphics card will result in frame rates like these. Yeah, that's an RTX 4090. So what's causing this horrible performance, and is it really the developer's fault? Well, yeah. See, when installing a mod that allows you to remove all of the fog, you might notice something. That's right. All of the buildings and objects that would not be visible without this mod are still being rendered at their highest quality even when you're really far away. Which is really ironic because the original version on the PlayStation 1 used the fog to increase performance. So there's no one else to blame here but the developers for not properly optimizing their game and relying purely on upscaling to make the game run well.
Well, it's that, and then there's also other tools that are used to varying degrees to avoid like LODs and things, or not, maybe not avoid, but to simplify and streamline the process of LODs. or levels of detail and stuff. As you get further away, usually it'll swap out for lower quality meshes and stuff so that it maintains performance. Some tools, like in Unreal Engine specifically, they use nanite, which is virtualized geometry. And the idea is basically that you don't have to deal with any of that. The engine just does it under the hood without you having to deal with it. And sometimes it works really well. Other times you get Unreal stutter, and we all know how those games work. So I think it's a mixture of an engine issue, and then again, like the studios and the executives that are deciding when the game is ready for launch are looking at it and they're saying, oh, so it's running at 30 frames. That's our floor. It's good enough. And honestly, the game released, I think, as far as I'm aware, this game sold quite well. And I played it. I thought it was good. It ran like donkey crap, and it still has like animation issues that Digital Foundry has outlined and discussed that I still don't think have been fixed fully. But like it's because it ran well enough that most people were able to hand wave it away. And then because of the big, very recognizable IP, they just kind of brute force their way through it, you know?
The reason people are so enraged with upscaling spreading like cancer in the industry is because even flagship systems like the PlayStation 5 Pro are now starting to utilize their own versions of this technology. So why are we paying thousands of dollars for high-end hardware when these studios rely on shortcuts to make games playable? Then you also have to factor in the increasing popularity of ray tracing in games, with some modern titles not even allowing you to turn it off, basically forcing you to use upscaling if you even dare to play on a PC that's not the price of your car. And for what? So a random puddle can have more realistic reflections?
Well, so one thing I heard that I've not been able to shake was the Digital Foundry piece that they did on, I think they were talking about just like general ray tracing, but it might have been on a specific topic other than that. But I remember it was a Digital Foundry clip we saw on stream where they were describing how the ray tracing or prevalence of ray tracing is effectively an industry shift. So prior to this, games like The Last of Us Part 2, for example, used techniques like baked-in lighting, where they could do a lot of the calculations for environments and for the lighting behind the scenes, like before the game launches, do it on the back end, build it into the scene so that it looks really, really good, but it's not actually dynamic. It doesn't actually change. And the reason that is important to understand is because that means that you can't do things like moving furniture in the scene. You can't have gameplay systems where like, you blow up the wall of the building and the lighting changes because more light gets in. You can't do things like dynamic day nights or weather that rolls in and changes the look of the scene. And all of that compounds into other things like development ease. Because at some point, if you're going through that, you lock in the scene, you bake in the lighting and everything, but then you go through play tests and it turns out there's an exploit there. Like, yeah, we gotta rearrange this room in downtown Seattle for Ellie. We gotta rearrange this couch, move this door, lock in that wall, put curtains up or whatever. That's what we have to do. And now you gotta redo all of the lighting work. You gotta rebake everything, and it's a huge headache. Whereas if it's just dynamic, if it's purely like ray traced based, it can change dynamically without much headache or concern. And there's some studios, of course, that have been able to find other different workarounds. Red Dead 2 obviously has a day-night cycle, looks graphically insanely beautiful and outrageous. But also it's important to understand that like these techniques work better in different scenarios. The reason why Cyberpunk was used to advertise ray tracing so much with NVIDIA is because it is tailor-made for ray tracing to be utilized. Neon lights, reflections, glass, shiny metal, all of those things thrive with ray tracing. But diffuse materials tend to do much better with like rasterized lighting and rendering techniques. So Red Dead Redemption 2 can look really, really good. But if they were to try to make GTA 6 with the same exact tools they used for Red Dead 2, I think it would not look anywhere near as good as you would think, because it's just not... That's not what it's built for, would look much closer to GTA 5 than what we've seen in recent trailers. But this effectively means that this is just like the new normal. Like a lot of these companies, their engines are being built out. So yes, as you mentioned, ray tracing is the standard. There is no turning it off. Already Digital Foundry was saying in their analysis of GTA 6's trailers and stuff that this is just the new norm. GTA 6 is not going to run without ray traced stuff on, because it's using ray traced global illumination like pathing and stuff. They're doing all sorts of really, really interesting techniques to achieve that. It's not path tracing like fully, you know, overdrive psycho mode like Cyberpunk can. Maybe the PC version will be able to do that, but they're using ray traced techniques to achieve global illumination, and that's just how the game runs. And so there's going to be like, if you're expecting GTA 6 to have like a toggle turn off ray tracing and get 60 frames, it's not how it works. A lot of these companies are just moving in this direction, and I do think in like 5 to 10 years it'll just be normal, and you know, nobody will think much about it. But right now it is frustrating because we do still have a lot of games that allow you to turn it off, and you will see it doesn't look as good as the ray traced version, but it runs way, way, way better. You know, it's just night and day. Growing pains, I suppose, is what they would say.
Like seriously, most people can't even tell the difference if you don't tell them which game is using ray tracing and which one isn't. But don't get me wrong, I'm not in any way saying I'm against nice graphics or gaming technology progressing forward, but can we at least make current games run well before we make games for the hardware we don't even have yet? Sure, keep ray tracing for the people who can afford to spend money on the absolute high-end hardware, but let's not build games around ray tracing and then cut corners and find shortcuts to make them run at an acceptable frame rate.
Yeah, I think it's about what is the floor, you know, and this is dictated by the players, to be clear. It's why I've been less concerned about this on an industry-wide level, because I think players often vote with their wallets, not all the time, but often vote with their wallets with regard to these things. So like if they're really dissatisfied with the performance of a game, what happens? They mass downvote it, they mass flag it, they refund it, they, you know, do review brigade and mass downvote and review bomb the game. Like in general, I think games get punished when they cut the corner too sharply, when they don't meet that floor. And if gamers make it clear 60 FPS is the floor for PC ports, that's what it needs to be, like especially on normal hardware. If we make it clear that we only want games optimized with native resolutions in mind, and then ray tracing, or rather upscalers are used to improve performance above that, then I think we're okay. But you gotta like figure out what that floor is, what that expectation is, and go from there.
We should make games around the average consumer and not around the current flagship components, because your average player is now running a 4090. So let's talk about why your average player is not using a 4090. As I briefly mentioned before, a big reason for these insane prices besides corporate greed are scalpers. A scalper is someone that buys as many PC components.
When was this video made? A year ago. Yeah, so this makes sense. One of you guys submitted it, but it is a year old, January of 25. Who's gonna tell him? Everything's great in the future. Everything's really good. Oops. Because I was like, he mentioned scalpers a couple times. That's funny. It's not really a problem anymore. And now that makes sense. But yeah, nowadays it's not really scalpers. Dude, I wish scalpers were the problem, because at least scalpers just affected GPUs. Nowadays, it's just RAM and like memory, which is in freaking everything. From GPUs to phones to consoles to whatever. Like everything is more expensive now if it's an electronic device. Even Samsung said that they're going to have to raise the prices of their refrigerators because of this. Like it's crazy. So, simpler times, January of 25. Can you imagine?
As possible as they get released, usually using different software and bots that are 1,000 times faster than an actual human trying to buy a GPU. And when the supply runs out, they sell it for an insane markup, making them tens of millions of dollars in the process. For example, back in
yeah, I mean, this part isn't that relevant anymore, so you know, we can kind of blast forward through it. But I do think it's important to remember that, like, even with the price hikes and everything we've seen, scalping is still an issue. Like, even though that's not the primary issue, it is still an issue. Steam machines, for example, were getting scalped and sold for like $3,000 a pop. Or like, God, can you imagine if like the PlayStation 6 launches with limited inventory and it's freaking like $1,000 to begin with? Dude, the PlayStation 6 is going to be scalped. It's going to be $4,000 to get a hold of one. Like, it's going to be insane. It's going to be outrageous. Like, it's just going to compound everything that we've already been seeing. It's going to make it way worse. So like right now, the primary component crisis is primarily because of AI, like data center build outs and stuff. But I mean, the second new hardware starts to drop, it's going to affect everything again. So scalping hasn't gone away. They've just kind of taken a break because There's just nobody's buying. But the moment there's a reason to buy a new thing like a next gen console, the scalpers will show up again. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's probably not even that close. But the good thing, however, is the price, where a 4090 right now goes for anywhere around $2,000 to $3,000. You could pick up a 5070 for around $600, but of course that's before all the scalpers get to it. A more realistic price for the 5070 in the first few months or even a year is around the 1,500 you were considering buying it for your next build.
Yeah.
But that pretty much wraps it up. I really appreciate you watching this video and sticking around up to this point. So
yeah, it's a solid video. You did a good job putting it together. It is, I should have looked at the date before we started, but I think it's still, the core chunk of the video is relevant as always when it just comes to optimization and how these studios are choosing to do it. Nowadays, in the last year and a half or so since this video went up, there has become, there's a broader trend with like frame generation, which is kind of the new crutch a lot of studios are relying on, unfortunately, where it's literally fake frames inserted into properly rendered frames, which is frustrating. You know, it can work magic, but as with most of these technologies, they are mainly magical when you have incredible hardware to begin with. Like DLSS and frame generation and those things, they work amazingly well when you're already running the game at like 100 frames per second, and then they take it to like 250. That's when it really, really feels magical, because you don't see hardly any graphical degradation because you're rendering at 4K and then it downscales to 1440p and upscales back up, and it just looks amazing and it runs amazing. That's when it's magical. Most people do not have that experience. Most people are running the game at 1080p and then trying to upscale from like 500p, and it looks terrible and it runs terrible and there's input lag and it's just terrible. So I do think this is still a conversation to be had. I think it's still something to be aware of, and to vote with your wallet. Like when you buy a brand new game and it runs like ass, return it. Like it's pretty simple. You know, you got to vote with your wallet. When you see something bad, you let them know that it's bad. And when you see something good, this is also important, you got to reward it. When you have a PC game that's optimized incredibly well, like a KCD2, reward that, you know, support them and that studio, because they're doing something that's quite rare in the form of releasing a polished game. So anyway, interesting topic, interesting breakdown. And it is fascinating to see how, even though the video is like a year old, how different things are in that period of time, where a year ago, the discussion was all around scalpers making things too expensive. And now there's still scalpers, but there's a whole new layer to it, you know, in the form of the data RAM crisis and everything. It's just wild. But anyway, thank you for the suggestion. Good video, Frughie. Recommend you guys go check it out. Show him some love. Again, the video's a little bit older, but I recommend you go check it out nonetheless, and see the other stuff that he's been working on recently. But until next time, my friends, much love. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.